when Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves slapped the woman in front of 250 soldiers and told her to know your place, he had 3 seconds to feel superior before she knocked him unconscious with a single punch. Those 3 seconds would be the last moments of his old life before everything changed. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Wednesday morning, 08:15 hours. The training field was packed with personnel assembled for a mandatory briefing on new hand-to-hand combat protocols. 250 soldiers, sailors, and Marines stood in loose formation, waiting for the session to begin. Most were SEAL candidates or support personnel, all of them required to attend. The morning sun was already heating up the California air. Men in various training uniforms talked quietly, checking phones, waiting with the particular impatience that comes from mandatory formations. A woman walked onto the field carrying a small backpack and a training folder. She was maybe 5'6", athletic build, wearing standard PT gear with no visible rank insignia or unit identification. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked to be in her mid-30s. She moved to the front of the formation, where instructors typically gathered, and set down her bag, pulling out a water bottle and notebook. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves noticed her immediately. He was a SEAL instructor with 8 years in the teams, known for his aggressive training style and his very vocal opinions about women in combat roles. He stood with a group of other SEAL instructors, all of them watching the woman with expressions ranging from confusion to disdain. "What the hell is she doing?" Reeves said to his companions, loud enough to be heard by nearby personnel. His friend, another instructor named Patterson, shrugged. "Probably lost. Maybe looking for the family support center or something." They laughed. Reeves walked over to where the woman stood, his stride confident, his body language clearly conveying that he owned this space and she didn't belong in it. "Hey," he called out. "You." The woman turned to face him, her expression neutral and calm. "What are you doing here?" "This is a restricted training area, combatives instruction for SEAL personnel only." "I'm here for the briefing," she said simply, her voice even and professional. Reeves looked her up and down with obvious contempt. "This briefing is for operators and combat instructors. Not for whatever you are. Administrative staff, medical, family services, whoever sent you here made a mistake." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," the woman replied calmly. Reeves's face reddened slightly. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by women. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know who you think you are, but this is SEAL training. We don't do participation trophies. We don't do diversity checkboxes. This is about combat effectiveness, and women don't belong in this environment." Several other instructors had moved closer, forming a loose semicircle. Some looked uncomfortable, but none intervened. The woman remained calm. "I understand your perspective, but I'm authorized to be here. Perhaps we can discuss this with the commanding officer when he arrives." Reeves stepped closer, invading her personal space in a classic intimidation move. "We're not discussing anything. You're leaving. Now, before you embarrass yourself further." "I'm not leaving," she said simply. The formation of 250 personnel was watching now. Conversations had stopped. Everyone sensed confrontation brewing. Reeves's anger was escalating. He was being defied in front of his students, in front of other instructors, in front of everyone. His ego couldn't accept it. "You really don't get it, do you? Women can't handle what we do here. You're physically weaker, emotionally softer, biologically designed for different roles. This isn't discrimination. It's just reality." The woman's expression didn't change. "I've heard that perspective before. It's incorrect, but I understand why you believe it." That response, so calm and dismissive of his authority, pushed Reeves over an edge he didn't know he was approaching. "You need to learn some respect," he said, his voice getting louder. You need to understand that there are places women don't belong. You need to know your place." And then, in front of 250 witnesses, Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves made the worst decision of his military career. He slapped her. Not a light tap. A full, open-handed slap across her face that made a sound like a gunshot in the suddenly silent training field. The woman's head snapped to the side from the impact. Her cheek immediately reddened. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire formation stood frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. Reeves stood with his hand still raised, adrenaline surging, his face showing a mixture of anger and satisfaction at having asserted his dominance. "Know your place," he said again, quieter this time but still audible to those nearby. The woman slowly turned her head back to face him. Her expression remained completely calm. The only sign of emotion was a slight narrowing of her eyes. She didn't touch her cheek, didn't step back, didn't show fear or shock or anger. She simply stood there for 3 seconds, looking at Reeves with an intensity that should have warned him something was very wrong. Those 3 seconds felt like an eternity to the 250 people watching. Then the woman moved. Her movement was so fast that most people didn't see it clearly. One moment she was standing still. The next moment her right fist was connecting with Reeves's jaw with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. The punch was technically perfect. Rotational power from her hips, full body weight behind it, precise contact point on the jaw just below the ear where the knockout button sits. Reeves's head snapped to the side. His eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, unconscious before he hit the ground. The woman stood over his collapsed form, her stance balanced and ready, her breathing controlled, showing no signs of exertion or stress. The silence was absolute. 250 people stood completely frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. A woman had just knocked out a SEAL instructor with a single punch. Patterson, who had been standing nearby, finally found his voice. "Holy shit," he whispered. The woman calmly knelt beside Reeves, checked his pulse and breathing with the efficiency of someone with medical training, then stood back up. "He's breathing normally. He'll regain consciousness in approximately 30 seconds. He should be evaluated for concussion." Her voice was steady, professional, showing no emotion. Another instructor, a chief petty officer named Williams, started to move toward her, his body language aggressive. "You just assaulted a Navy instructor. You're under arrest." The woman turned to face him, and something in her expression made Williams stop in his tracks. "Staff Sergeant Reeves committed battery by striking me in the face in front of 250 witnesses. I responded with appropriate defensive force to neutralize the threat. That's not assault, that's self-defense." Williams hesitated, recognizing that she was technically correct, but unable to process the larger situation. The woman pulled out a military ID from her pocket and held it up. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a civilian contractor with the Department of Defense. I'm here under orders from JSOC to evaluate your hand-to-hand combat training program." She paused, letting that information sink in. "I'm also the lead combatives instructor for Special Operations Forces. I've trained operators from every branch of Special Operations for the past 10 years, and before that, I was a professional mixed martial artist with a record of 23-2, including 3 championship titles." The formation remained silent, but the energy had changed from shock to something else. Realization, understanding, horror at what had just happened. Reeves groaned and started to regain consciousness. He rolled onto his side, confused and disoriented. What happened?" The woman looked down at him. "You struck me. I defended myself. You were unconscious for approximately 45 seconds. You likely have a mild concussion. You should seek medical attention. Reeves touched his jaw, which was already swelling. His eyes focused on the woman standing above him, and memory returned. You hit me. After you hit me? Yes. Reeves tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate yet. He remained on the ground, his humiliation complete in front of everyone he had tried to impress. The sound of boots running across the field made everyone turn. The base commanding officer, Captain James Rodriguez, was sprinting toward the formation with several senior enlisted personnel following. "What the hell is going on here?" Rodriguez demanded as he reached the group. "I received reports of an altercation." He saw Reeves on the ground, saw the woman standing calmly nearby, and his face showed confusion and concern. "Someone better start explaining. Now." Patterson spoke up. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Reeves struck this woman." She responded by knocking him unconscious with one punch. Rodriguez turned to the woman, his expression shifting from anger to recognition. "Ms. Chen? Sarah Chen?" "Yes, Captain Rodriguez." Rodriguez's face went pale. "Oh God, please tell me Marcus didn't." "He slapped me in the face and told me to know my place," Chen said calmly. "I defended myself with appropriate force." Rodriguez looked like he might be sick. He turned to Reeves, who was finally managing to stand with help from other instructors. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, you just committed battery against the DoD's senior combatives instructor in front of 250 witnesses. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Reeves's face showed dawning horror. I didn't know who she was, sir." "That's not the problem," Rodriguez said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The problem is that you hit someone, that you physically struck another person because they didn't defer to your authority, that you assaulted someone based on your assumption about their gender and role." He turned to address the entire formation. "Everyone will remain in formation. This briefing is postponed. Military police are en route. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you are confined to quarters pending investigation for assault and battery." "Sir," Reeves tried to speak, but Rodriguez cut him off. "Not another word. You are in more trouble than you can possibly comprehend." He turned to Chen. "Ms. Chen, I apologize on behalf of this entire command. What happened here is unacceptable and does not represent the values we claim to uphold." Chen nodded slightly. "Captain, I appreciate the apology, but I want to be clear about something. Staff Sergeant Reeves didn't act in a vacuum. He felt comfortable striking me because he operates in a culture that tolerates disrespect toward women. That's the real problem." She looked at the 250 people in formation. "I was sent here to evaluate your combatives training program, but in the past 10 minutes, I've learned more about this command's culture than a week of official evaluation could have revealed." Rodriguez looked pained, but nodded. "You're right. And that will be addressed." Chen picked up her bag. "I need to file my incident report and receive medical evaluation for the strike to my face. Then I'll continue with my scheduled evaluation. Unless you'd prefer, I recommend that JSOC send a different evaluator." "No," Rodriguez said quickly. "Please continue your evaluation. We need it now more than ever." Chen walked toward the administrative building, her stride calm and confident, showing no signs of having just knocked out a SEAL instructor in front of a crowd. Behind her, the formation stood in stunned silence. Reeves was being escorted away by military police who had arrived with remarkable speed, and 250 soldiers, sailors, and Marines were processing a lesson they would never forget. That assumptions about capability based on gender or appearance were dangerous, that disrespect had consequences, that the quiet woman you dismissed might be the most dangerous person on the field. Captain Rodriguez addressed the formation. "What you just witnessed will be investigated thoroughly. But I want to say something now, while you're all here. Ms. Sarah Chen is one of the most accomplished combat instructors in the Department of Defense. She has trained SEAL Team 6 operators, Delta Force, Marine Raiders, and every other elite unit you can name. He paused. Staff Sergeant Reeves saw a woman and made assumptions. Those assumptions led him to behavior that was not only illegal, but tactically stupid, because he dramatically underestimated someone based on gender, and he paid the price. He looked at each section of the formation. Let this be a lesson. In combat, the enemy doesn't always look like what you expect. The asset you need to protect might not fit your preconceptions. The person who can save your life might be someone you'd otherwise dismiss. Judge people by their capabilities, not their appearance. The formation was dismissed, but nobody really left. They stood in clusters, talking in hushed tones about what they had just witnessed. The story was already spreading through the base. Within hours, it would spread through the entire SEAL community. The staff sergeant who slapped a woman and got knocked out in front of 250 witnesses. And the woman who defended herself with such devastating effectiveness that she left no doubt about her capabilities. The lesson had been taught. Now the question was whether the command would learn from it. In the base medical facility, Sarah Chen sat on an examination table while a Navy corpsman photographed the red handprint on her face and documented her injuries for the official report. Captain Rodriguez stood nearby with the base legal officer, Commander Patricia Hayes, who was already building the case against Staff Sergeant Reeves. "Ms. Chen," Hayes said, taking detailed notes, "can you walk me through exactly what happened, step by step?" Chen recounted the incident with precise, clinical detail. Every word Reeves had said, the exact sequence of events, the physical contact, her defensive response. "And you're certain you want to press charges?" Hayes asked. "Given your position and the visibility this will have, you could choose to handle this administratively rather than through court-martial." Chen looked at her directly. "Commander, if I don't press charges, the message to every woman in the military is that assault by male personnel is acceptable as long as the victim doesn't make waves. That's not a message I'm willing to send." Hayes nodded with approval. "Good. We'll proceed with formal charges: battery, conduct unbecoming, and violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice Article 128. "What's the likely outcome?" Rodriguez asked. "Given the number of witnesses and the clear evidence," Hayes said, "conviction is almost certain. He's looking at reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, and possible brig time." Chen spoke up. "I want to propose an alternative." Both officers looked at her with surprise. "Alternative to court-martial?" Hayes asked. "Not alternative to consequences," Chen clarified. "Alternative to purely punitive measures. Staff Sergeant Reeves demonstrated profound ignorance about women's capabilities and deep-seated bias that led to criminal behavior. But destroying his career doesn't address the root problem." "What are you suggesting?" Rodriguez asked carefully. Chen pulled out her tablet and opened a document. "I'm proposing a 90-day intensive retraining program. Reeves would work directly with me and other female combat instructors. He'd undergo cultural competency training, serve in support roles to female-led units, and write detailed reports on what he learns about his own biases." "That's remarkably generous given what he did to you," Hayes observed. "It's practical," Chen replied. "Reeves isn't unique. He's a product of a culture that tolerates and sometimes encourages his attitudes. If we can transform him from someone who exemplifies that toxic culture to someone who actively fights against it, we create more value than just punishing him." She looked at Rodriguez. "Plus, it sends a message that this command is serious about change, not just about discipline." Rodriguez considered this. He'd still face consequences: reduction in rank, formal reprimand, loss of instructor status pending completion of the program. "Absolutely," Chen agreed. "But he'd have a path back if he genuinely learns and changes. I'll take your recommendation to the command, Rodriguez said. But Chen, why are you doing this? You'd be completely justified in wanting maximum punishment. Chen touched her still swollen cheek. Because I've been in the martial arts and military training world for 15 years. I've encountered hundreds of Marcus Reeveses. Some were redeemable, some weren't. But the ones who were, who genuinely transformed, became some of the strongest advocates for equality and respect. She stood. I'd rather create an advocate than eliminate an enemy. That's how culture actually changes. Meanwhile, in the base brig, Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves sat in a holding cell, processing the catastrophic destruction of his career and his ego. His jaw throbbed. His head ached from the concussion. But worse than the physical pain was the humiliation of knowing that 250 people had watched him get knocked unconscious by a woman he had dismissed as irrelevant. A guard opened the cell door. You have a visitor, JAG officer. A Navy lieutenant commander in legal uniform entered. His name tape read, Morrison. Staff Sergeant Reeves, I'm your appointed defense counsel. We need to discuss your situation, which is quite serious. Morrison laid out the charges, the evidence, and the likely outcomes. All of them bad. You committed battery in front of 250 witnesses, Morrison said bluntly. You struck a civilian contractor who was authorized to be present. The video footage is crystal clear. There is no defense available that has any chance of success. Reeves put his head in his hands. My career is over. Yes, Morrison agreed. At minimum, you're looking at dishonorable discharge. More likely, you're looking at brig time, followed by discharge. He paused. However, there's something unusual. Ms. Chen has proposed an alternative to standard court-martial proceedings. Morrison explained Chen's proposal for the 90-day retraining program. Reeves looked up with disbelief. Why would she do that? I hit her. I humiliated her in front of everyone. Why would she offer me any kind of break? Morrison shrugged. According to her statement, she believes transforming you is more valuable than destroying you. She thinks you can learn from this and become someone who prevents others from making the same mistakes. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. I don't understand. In my world, you destroy your enemies. You don't give them second chances? That's exactly the mindset that got you here, Morrison observed. Maybe that's what she wants you to learn. 2 days later, a formal hearing was convened. Reeves was formally charged with battery and conduct unbecoming. The evidence was presented, including video footage captured by multiple witnesses on their phones. The footage showed everything. Reeves's aggressive approach, his escalating hostility, the moment of the slap, with the sound making multiple witnesses flinch, and Chen's devastating counterpunch that left no doubt about her combat effectiveness. Chen testified calmly and professionally, describing the incident without embellishment or emotion. Then she presented her alternative proposal to the tribunal. The presiding officer, a Navy captain named Sullivan, looked skeptical. Ms. Chen, with respect, you're the victim here. Staff Sergeant Reeves committed a violent crime against you. Why are you advocating for leniency? Not leniency, Chen corrected. Transformation. There's a difference. He will still face significant consequences. But those consequences can be constructive, rather than purely punitive. Sullivan looked at Reeves. Staff Sergeant, do you accept this proposal? Do you understand what's being offered and what it requires? Reeves stood. Yes, sir, I accept. And sir, I want to say that I was wrong, completely wrong, about Ms. Chen, about women in combat roles, about everything I said and did that day. His voice shook slightly. I don't deserve this opportunity, but if I'm given it, I'll use it to become someone different, someone better. Sullivan consulted with the other tribunal members, then delivered the decision. Staff Sergeant Reeves, this tribunal finds you guilty of battery under Article 128 of the UCMJ. You are hereby reduced in rank to corporal. You will forfeit half pay for 6 months. You will be removed from instructor status, and you will complete the 90-day retraining program designed by Ms. Chen. He looked at Reeves sternly. If you fail to complete this program satisfactorily, or if you demonstrate any further conduct that suggests you haven't learned from this incident, you will be dishonorably discharged. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I understand. Dismissed. The next morning, Corporal Marcus Reeves reported to the Combatives Training Center at 0600 hours. Sarah Chen was waiting, along with 3 other female combat instructors. Good morning, Corporal Reeves, Chen said formally. For the next 90 days, you're assigned to me. You'll learn advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques, yes, but more importantly, you'll learn why everything you believed about women in combat was wrong. She gestured to the other instructors. This is Captain Maria Santos, Army Special Forces. This is Gunnery Sergeant Jessica Park, Marine Corps Martial Arts Instructor. This is Lieutenant Commander Rachel Foster, Navy SEAL Combat Diving Instructor. All 3 women looked at Reeves with expressions that made clear he would receive no sympathy or easy treatment. For the next 90 days, Chen continued, you're going to train with us, learn from us, and document your transformation. You'll write daily journals about your observations and changing perspectives. You'll work in support roles for female-led training exercises, and you'll learn what genuine respect looks like. Reeves nodded. I'm ready, ma'am. We'll see, Chen said. Most men in your position claim readiness but resist actual change. Some of them wash out, some of them learn. Which one will you be? I'll be one who learns, ma'am. I promise. Don't promise me, Chen said. Prove it. Over the first week, Reeves underwent the most humbling experience of his military career. He observed Captain Santos leading a Special Forces training exercise where her tactical decisions were flawless. He watched Gunnery Sergeant Park demonstrate combat techniques that he couldn't replicate despite his size and strength advantage. He participated in Lieutenant Commander Foster's combat diving course and struggled to keep up with female students half his size. Every day shattered another assumption he had carried for his entire career. On day 8, Chen had him spar with her in front of a training class. She controlled the entire match effortlessly, demonstrating superior technique, timing, and tactical thinking despite his physical advantages. After she submitted him with an armbar for the 3rd time, she helped him up. What did you learn, Corporal? Reeves caught his breath. That size and strength don't determine capability, ma'am. That technique and training matter more than raw physical power. That I've been wrong about everything. Good start, Chen said. But understanding intellectually is different from believing emotionally. We're working on the emotional transformation. That takes longer. On day 15, Reeves wrote in his mandatory daily journal. Today, Captain Santos explained how she was consistently underestimated in Afghanistan, and how she used that underestimation to gather intelligence that conventional male operators couldn't access. Enemy combatants would talk freely around her because they didn't perceive her as a threat. She gathered information that prevented 3 major attacks. I realized that my bias wasn't just wrong morally, it was wrong tactically. By dismissing women's capabilities, I was limiting operational effectiveness. On day 30, Chen had Reeves attend a briefing where female operators from multiple special operations units discussed their combat experiences. He heard stories of courage, tactical brilliance, and physical endurance that matched or exceeded anything he had experienced. One operator, a Delta Force sergeant, described a firefight in Syria where she had dragged 2 wounded male teammates to safety while under direct fire, then returned to combat and eliminated 3 enemy combatants. After the briefing, Reeves approached her. Ma'am, I need to apologize. Not just to you specifically, but to every woman I dismissed or disrespected during my career. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The sergeant looked at him carefully. Apology noted. But words are easy. Show me through your actions going forward. I will, ma'am. I promise. On day 60, Chen evaluated Reeves's progress in a formal review. You've made significant progress, she told him. Your technical skills have improved dramatically. More importantly, your attitude has genuinely shifted. The question is whether that shift is permanent or just performance for evaluation. Reeves met her eyes. Ma'am, I know I can't prove it in words, but I'm not the same person who slapped you 2 months ago. That person was ignorant, arrogant, and dangerous. I'm trying to become someone who prevents others from making the same mistakes. Chen nodded slowly. Good. Because your final 30 days are going to test whether you actually believe what you're saying. On day 61 of his retraining program, Corporal Reeves was given his most challenging assignment yet. Sarah Chen walked into the training room where he was waiting and handed him a folder. For the final 30 days, you're going to do something different. You're going to become an instructor yourself. Reeves looked at the folder with confusion. Ma'am, I'm not qualified to... Not a combat instructor. A cultural instructor. You're going to teach a course on recognizing and eliminating gender bias in military training environments. Reeves felt his stomach drop. Ma'am, who would listen to me? Everyone knows what I did. I'm the poster child for exactly the problem I'd be teaching about. Exactly, Chen said. That's what makes you credible. You're not someone preaching from a position of moral superiority. You're someone who failed catastrophically and learned from it. That's more powerful than any perfect instructor could be. She opened the folder. You'll teach 3 classes per week to incoming SEAL candidates and other training personnel. You'll tell your story. You'll explain what you learned. You'll challenge them to examine their own biases before those biases lead to the kind of incident you caused. Reeves read through the curriculum Chen had developed. It was comprehensive, challenging, and forced him to confront his own transformation publicly. This is going to be humiliating, he said quietly. Yes, Chen agreed. But humiliation is part of the learning process. You humiliated me in front of 250 people. Now you'll humiliate yourself in service of teaching those people not to make your mistakes. When does this start? Tomorrow. Your first class is 50 SEAL candidates who were in the formation the day you slapped me. They watched the entire incident. Now they'll hear what you learned from it. The next morning, Reeves stood in front of 50 young SEALs, all of them watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. He recognized several faces from that day. His hands were shaking as he began. My name is Corporal Marcus Reeves. 10 weeks ago, I was a staff sergeant and a SEAL combat instructor. I was confident, experienced, and completely certain of my beliefs about women in combat roles. He paused. Then I committed battery by slapping a woman I assumed didn't belong in a SEAL training environment. She responded by knocking me unconscious with a single punch. That woman was Sarah Chen, one of the most accomplished combat instructors in the Department of Defense. Some of the candidates smirked, others looked uncomfortable. You can laugh, Reeves said. I deserve it. What I did was criminal, stupid, and based on assumptions that could have gotten people killed in a combat environment. He pulled up a slide showing his service record before the incident. I want to show you who I was. 8 years as a SEAL, multiple deployments, solid record, respected instructor. By most measures, I was successful. He pulled up the next slide showing the charges against him. And then, in about 3 minutes, I destroyed all of that. Because I let bias and ego override judgment and discipline. For the next hour, Reeves walked through the incident in painful detail, what he had believed, why he had acted, the assumptions that led him to assault Chen, and the devastating consequences. Then he described the past 60 days of retraining, working with female instructors who demonstrated capabilities that shattered every assumption he had held. Learning that his biases weren't just morally wrong, tactically dangerous. Here's what I want you to understand, Reeves said as he concluded. Every single person in this room has biases. Most of you probably carry the same assumptions I did about women's capabilities in combat roles. He looked at them directly. The difference is you're getting this lesson before you commit a career-ending crime. You have the opportunity to examine your biases now, while they're just thoughts, before they become actions with consequences. A candidate raised his hand. Corporal, do you really believe women can perform at the same level as men in combat? Or are you just saying that because you got in trouble? Reeves had anticipated this question. 2 months ago, I would have said no, would have given you all kinds of reasons about physical differences and biological limitations, would have been completely confident in that answer. He pulled up photos of the female instructors he'd been training with. Now, I've seen Captain Santos make tactical decisions under pressure that were superior to male Special Forces officers. I've watched Gunnery Sergeant Park defeat male Marines who outweighed her by 80 pounds. I've trained with Lieutenant Commander Foster, who has more combat deployments than most SEALs in this room. He paused. So yes, I genuinely believe women can perform at the same level as men, because I've seen it. And the only reason I didn't see it before was because my bias prevented me from looking. Another candidate spoke up. But Corporal, aren't there physical differences? Don't men have natural advantages? Reeves nodded. Yes, on average, men have greater upper body strength and different physical capabilities. But combat effectiveness isn't just about raw strength. It's about tactical thinking, mental discipline, technical skill, and the ability to make good decisions under pressure. He pulled up combat statistics. Female operators have mission success rates equal to or exceeding their male counterparts. They have lower injury rates because they rely more on technique than force, and they bring tactical advantages that male operators don't have, particularly in cultural environments where approaching women is more acceptable. A third candidate asked the question Reeves knew was coming. If you could go back to that day, what would you do differently? Everything, Reeves said immediately. I would verify who she was before approaching. I would treat her with basics, respect regardless of who she was. I would question my own assumptions instead of acting on them. And I absolutely would never, under any circumstances, put my hands on another person in anger. He looked at the group. But more fundamentally, I would have done the internal work earlier, examined my biases, questioned my assumptions, learned about women's capabilities before I needed that knowledge in a crisis moment. The class ended, and several candidates approached Reeves privately. One of them, a young SEAL candidate named Morrison, spoke quietly. Corporal, I want to be honest. I have the same biases you had. I don't think I believe women can really handle this job. But watching what happened to you, I don't want to end up the same way. Reeves appreciated the honesty. Then start questioning those beliefs now. Observe female operators when you get the chance. Read the studies. Talk to people who've served with women in combat. Don't wait until you're in a situation like mine. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Over the next 3 weeks, Reeves taught 6 more classes. Each one was difficult, forcing him to relive his failure and transformation publicly. But he also saw impact. Students asking questions, challenging their own assumptions, approaching him privately to discuss their own biases. On day 85, Sarah Chen observed one of his classes without him knowing she was there. She sat in the back, watching how he taught, listening to how he described his transformation. After the class ended, she approached him. That was well done. You're not just reciting lessons. You're teaching from genuine understanding. Reeves looked at her, still carrying visible shame about what he'd done. Ma'am, I need to say something. I've apologized before, but I don't think I really understood what I was apologizing for. Now I do. He took a breath. I assaulted you because I couldn't handle a woman not deferring to my authority. That was about my ego, my insecurity, my need to feel dominant. It wasn't about you at all. And I'm deeply sorry for that." Chen nodded. "Apology accepted. But the better apology is what you're doing now, teaching others not to make the same mistakes. That has more value than words." She handed him a folder. "This is your final evaluation. You've completed 85 days successfully. The last 5 days, you'll present your transformation to the base leadership and to a gathering of all combat instructors on this base." Reeves opened the folder and saw the schedule. Final presentation to Captain Rodriguez and the senior staff. Then a larger presentation to over 100 combat instructors from various units. "That's a lot of people, ma'am." "Yes, because this lesson needs to reach as many people as possible. Your failure and transformation have value beyond just your own development. They can prevent future incidents." On day 90, Reeves stood in front of Captain Rodriguez and the senior staff of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Hua presented a comprehensive report on his 90-day transformation. What he had believed and why. How those beliefs were challenged and changed. What he learned about women's capabilities in combat. And how he would apply those lessons going forward. Rodriguez listened carefully, asking pointed questions, probing whether the transformation was genuine. Finally, he delivered his assessment. "Corporal Reeves, 90 days ago you committed one of the worst acts I've seen in 30 years of service. You assaulted a civilian contractor based on gender bias and ego. You humiliated yourself in this command." Reeves stood at attention, accepting the condemnation. "But," Rodriguez continued, "you've also done something difficult. You've genuinely examined your own failures, learned from them, and committed to becoming someone better. That doesn't erase what you did, but it gives you a path forward." He stood. "Your rank is restored to Staff Sergeant. However, you will not return to SEAL training instruction. Instead, you're being assigned to the newly created Cultural Competency and Inclusion Office. Your job will be teaching the course you've been developing, working to prevent future incidents like yours, and serving as a resource for personnel dealing with gender bias issues." Reeves felt mixed emotions. Gratitude for not being discharged, disappointment at not returning to his previous role, but also understanding that this new path had value. "Thank you, sir. I won't waste this opportunity. See that you don't." That afternoon, Reeves gave his final presentation to over 100 combat instructors assembled in the base auditorium. He told his story one more time, but this time he added something new. "I'm not standing here as someone who has it all figured out. I'm standing here as someone who failed catastrophically and is still learning. Some of you probably think I got off too easy. Some of you think I'm just performing for evaluation. Some of you think the whole retraining program was politically correct nonsense." He looked around the room. "But here's what I know now that I didn't know 90 days ago. Women in combat roles make us more effective, not less. They bring capabilities and perspectives that improve operational success. And anyone who can't see that is operating with the same tactical blindness I had." He pulled up his final slide. "What happened to me can happen to any of you. One moment of bias-driven action can destroy a career, but more importantly, it can harm someone else and compromise mission effectiveness. Don't wait until you're standing where I am to examine your beliefs." After the presentation, several instructors approached him. Some were skeptical, some were supportive. But all of them engaged with the material, which was what Chen had told him was the goal. That evening, Reeves met with Chen for his final evaluation meeting. "You completed the 90 days," she said, "successfully by most measures. You taught effectively. You demonstrated genuine growth. You'll be a valuable resource in your new position." She paused. "But I want to ask you something. Do you think you would have changed without this forced transformation? If you hadn't slapped me and faced consequences, would you ever have examined your biases?" Reeves thought carefully. Honestly? Probably not. I would have kept believing what I believed, kept treating women with disrespect, kept thinking I was right. It took catastrophic failure to force me to change. That's what concerns me, Chen said. Not about you specifically, but about how we create cultural change. Most people only transform after crisis. We need to figure out how to teach these lessons before the crisis happens. Maybe that's what I can do now, Reeves offered. Use my story to create small crises of understanding for others. Make them confront their biases before those biases hurt someone. Chen smiled slightly. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Welcome to the long, difficult work of culture change, Staff Sergeant Reeves. She extended her hand, and they shook. For Reeves, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where his greatest failure became his most important qualification. For Chen, it was confirmation that her choice to teach rather than destroy had created value beyond just one person's transformation. 3 years after the incident, Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves stood in front of 200 senior enlisted personnel at the Navy's Senior Enlisted Academy. He was no longer the angry, biased instructor who had assaulted Sarah Chen. He had spent 3 years in cultural education, teaching dozens of classes, developing programs now being implemented across the Department of Defense. But he still began every presentation the same way. My name is Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, and 3 years ago, I committed battery by slapping a woman I assumed didn't belong in a SEAL training environment. She knocked me unconscious with a single punch in front of 250 witnesses. The audience shifted, some recognizing the story. That woman was Sarah Chen, one of the most accomplished combat instructors in military history. That moment destroyed my career, my ego, and every assumption I'd held about women in combat roles. For 90 minutes, Reeves walked through his transformation and the data showing how gender bias compromised operational effectiveness. A Master Chief stood up after. Staff Sergeant, how do we know you're not just performing? That you haven't just learned what to say? Reeves had heard this question many times. You don't know for certain. All I can offer is 3 years of consistent action. But the better question is, what are you doing to examine your own biases? Dismissing my transformation is easier than questioning your own beliefs. After the presentation, a young female Marine sergeant approached him. Staff Sergeant, I faced the same disrespect you showed Ms. Chen, but usually it doesn't have consequences. Seeing someone actually face accountability and change gives me hope. I'm sorry you've experienced that, Sergeant. I hope the military is getting better at holding people accountable. It is, slowly, partly because of your work. That evening, Reeves received an email from Chen. Marcus, I heard about your presentation. The feedback has been exceptional. You're doing exactly what I hoped you would. Keep teaching. Sarah. He wrote back. Sarah, you could have destroyed me. Instead, you gave me a chance to become someone worth becoming. I'll spend the rest of my career trying to honor that gift. 2 years later, now gunnery sergeant, Reeves's cultural competency program had been so successful it was being adapted for the entire Department of Defense. He had trained over 2,000 personnel. Female attrition rates had dropped from 28% to 8%. Harassment complaints had decreased dramatically. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Reeves spoke at Sarah Chen's retirement ceremony, held on the same training field where he had slapped her. Over 500 people attended. Reeves was called to the podium. 5 years ago, I stood on this field and committed one of the worst acts of my military career. I assaulted Ms. Chen because I couldn't accept that a woman belonged in a SEAL training environment. The crowd was silent. She responded by knocking me unconscious. But more importantly, she responded by teaching me. She chose transformation over punishment. She chose to create an advocate instead of destroying an enemy. He pulled out a notebook. Over the past 5 years, I've kept records of the impact of that choice. The 2,000-plus personnel trained, the harassment complaints prevented, the improved retention of female personnel. All of that happened because one woman chose to teach rather than destroy. He looked at Chen. Miss Chen, you saved my career. But more than that, you helped me become someone worth saving. You taught me that assumptions are tactical vulnerabilities, that respect isn't optional, it's essential for effectiveness. When Chen gave her retirement speech, she addressed the incident directly. 5 years ago, Marcus Reeves slapped me in front of 250 witnesses. I had a choice: destroy him through maximum punishment or teach him and hope for transformation. She looked at Reeves. I chose teaching because I believed people can genuinely change if given opportunity and guidance. Marcus proved that belief correct. He did the hard work of examining his biases and becoming someone different. Then he taught thousands of others. She addressed the full crowd. That's the legacy I'm most proud of. Not the operations I conducted or the students I trained directly, but the culture change that happened when one person transformed and then helped transform others. That's how real change happens. After the ceremony, Chen handed Reeves a folder. This is a comprehensive cultural competency curriculum for all Special Operations Forces. It needs an instructor who understands the material deeply and teaches from experience. I'm recommending you for the position. Reeves scanned the ambitious program. This would change how we train every special operator in the country. Exactly. And you're the right person to lead it. You've proven transformation is possible. Now help institutionalize it. 5 years later, Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves commanded the DoD Cultural Competency and Combat Effectiveness Institute, training over 10,000 personnel annually. Studies showed dramatic improvements in unit cohesion, retention, and mission success. On the 10th anniversary of the incident, Sarah Chen passed away from cancer at age 52. Hundreds gathered for her memorial service. Reeves spoke about transformation and teaching. 10 years ago, Sarah Chen made a choice. When I assaulted her, she chose to teach instead of punish. That choice changed my life, changed thousands of other lives, and ultimately changed military culture. He paused, emotion in his voice. I'm standing here as proof that transformation is possible, that someone who exemplified toxic culture can become someone who fights against it, that teaching is more powerful than punishment. That's Sarah's legacy. He pulled out the original folder from day one of his training. She gave me this with her philosophy. Transform, rather, then destroy. Create advocates from enemies. Believe in the possibility of change even when evidence suggests otherwise. That philosophy changed the military through individual transformations that spread and multiplied. After the service, a young female Marine approached him. Master Guns, my drill instructor showed us the video of the incident, then videos of you teaching about transformation. Knowing the military has people like you who genuinely changed makes me proud to serve. Reeves felt the weight of those words. The military is getting better because people like Sarah Chen refused to give up on people like me. Keep that standard. But also believe people can change. Years later, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves taught his final class before retirement. The auditorium was packed. He told the story one last time, adding final statistics. In 15 years, over 50,000 military personnel have gone through cultural competency training that started with my transformation. Harassment complaints are down 60%. Retention of women is up 40%. Operational effectiveness in integrated units exceeds non-integrated units by measurable margins. He looked at the audience. That's the legacy of one woman who chose to teach rather than destroy. One person who believed transformation was possible and made it happen. That's Sarah Chen's real victory. After the class, Reeves stood on the training field where it had all happened. He pulled out his phone and read Chen's last message. "Marcus, you've exceeded every hope I had. The culture you've built will outlive both of us. That's legacy. Be proud of who you became. Sarah." Reeves walked off the field. His career was over, but the work would continue, because transformation wasn't just possible, it was powerful. And teaching was always more valuable than destroying. That was Sarah Chen's lesson. And it was the lesson that would define military culture for generations to come.